Erin Feldman, good morning.
Good morning, Chris.
How are you?
I'm all right.
Yeah, you're all right?
Caffeinated.
Good.
Luck of a little courage shot.
Just a little boost to kind of ease the nerves,
yeah,
right?
just enough to level the playing field.
Right.
Keep myself less on a crazy level.
Well, crazy could be a lot of fun.
I just get very energetic.
Good.
I come from my mother, who's very energetic.
Your mother is energetic.
Yeah, it needs to be less so in the morning.
Well, before we move on, I would like to say welcome. You're on deck.
Yay.
Erin Feldman. Erin, you're our art director. Art. Our art director, and have been for many, 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 many years.
That's hard to think about.
Well, but it is. Like you said, you started here about 7 years ago, over 7 years ago now. And you've done a fantastic job in everything that you've been, every task that you've been assigned. And there's so many things that I want to talk to you about today. So the first thing that I really, it keeps coming into mind when I was thinking about our conversation overnight is your work ethic. Mm-hmm. Your work ethic is second to none.
I try my hardest.
Well, yes, you do, but it doesn't even seem, for you, it doesn't even seem like you're trying. It just seems like it is absolutely positively a fundamental part of your DNA to work hard and to be on top of stuff at all times.
That's how I keep myself level. So I come from a very hardworking family, almost too hardworking, but I get that from my mother and my grandmother. Not my dad, but most of my family is, very hardworking, get the job done. Especially because when I started being art director, we were a little understaffed. So I was kind of used to having 4 people. I went down to 3 people, so I had to put the extra effort so that we didn't drown, to put a boat pun. Keep our head above water. And then
there's another one.
Really good with boat puns.
Right.
Yes, I've always been like that. If there's a deadline, I always got things done 2 weeks early. I don't believe in deadlines. I believe in pushing those deadlines early. So if there's any unfortunate circumstances or I don't understand something, I have a little leeway,
right?
Which is a little difficult in marketing.
Well, let me ask you something. Going back, because you said you come from a hardworking family. Your mom's a hard worker. Your grandmother's a hard worker. So let's go back to your grandmother. Like, what did she do? And was there something that she taught you, or did it pass through your mom? I'm curious how this this hardworking nature came into your life.
Well, it's actually my grandmother on my dad's side, because my dad wasn't a hard worker, but he was a smart worker. Mm-hmm. My grandmother, she raised 2 kids, and she was on welfare coming from Queens, New York. She worked, and her and my grandfather had, hustle every day to get money. And then when she divorced him when my dad was older, she started working in marketing or sales, and then went into marketing. But she, put in the extra time, put in the extra effort, build relationships, and that way you'll succeed. She went from, living in a welfare to having a very nice home in middle of Kentucky.
Really?
Yeah, so they came from not nothing, but very little. My family's, from Poland and Germany, so most of my grandparents are first generation.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. So your grandmother was first generation here in the States?
My grandfather was. I don't know about my grandmother so much, but I'm pretty sure it's first or second. My great-grandparents ran a boarding house in, I don't know what the city is in New York. It's like they're in New York City, but they're on Bayside maybe?
In Queens or Brooklyn?
I'm pretty sure in Queens.
Queens, okay.
My grandmothers, they ran a boarding house in the summer and lived downstairs, and so I guess she got her work ethic from her parents.
Okay.
Who, hustled all summer.
So kind of the classic American immigrant story. You come here with, literally next to nothing and start off doing whatever you can or what they could and built it into something.
Yeah, that's how my uncle, I guess he's my great uncle, built an entire business while being a teacher, being a photographer, and shooting people in the city that had trouble getting photography done, and did all himself, built a business really slowly with real estate. I mean, so everyone in my family is kind of like that.
That's so cool. And I've had the opportunity to not meet your mom, but I've spoken with her on the phone a number of times, and she's got that same drive too. Very hardworking, like extreme follow-up. Always
following up, always on the phone. She'll work till 8 if she needs to. She works very hard. I wish she would work a little less hard.
Right.
But works very hard. I grew up with both my parents, always on the phone, making sure that their job got done. And
so that was the environment that you grew up in, was just your parents. Your parents were working hard all the time, and it just kind of soaked in.
Plus, it was, if you don't get straight A's, what are you doing? So I always, I occasionally got a B, but I had to get straight A's to be that overachiever, meet expectations.
Okay, so that's interesting. That leads me to a couple questions. Number one, did you feel, was there an overwhelming sense of pressure to achieve at that level? Was it hard?
A lot of it was, I hate to say, a lot of it did come easy to me in most subjects. There was certain pressures I always felt from, especially my mom, to get straight A's because a lot of these things were easy to her, so she assumed it was easy for me. I struggled obviously a bit with English because writing has never been my strong point. I'm much better at math and art, and my handwriting is atrocious.
Join the club.
Atrocious.
Yeah.
But so a lot of the time it came easy. So by the time it became hard, I refused to get that B. And good example, my government class in high school, I would read every chapter 3 times. 1 to just read it, 1 to take notes, 1 to do homework.
Wow.
Just to get through the class and I got an A in that class. I got the credit for it in college too, but because I refuse to fail. I don't like failure.
Interesting. I mean, anybody that knows anything about me knows that I was not a very hardworking student. Hard work for me came in other areas later in life, and I love hard work. Like, I really enjoy working, as I know you do. But school for me was not the area that I was able to really ignite any passion. But for you, it was almost just this will to not fail at a very young age in your life, right?
I loved school. If I didn't have to work, I would be a perpetual student.
Really?
Study art history, go and paint around the world. I mean, I'd be an art student, but I like school. I enjoy learning. I like questioning. I love the back and forth with teachers. On an art side, I like the critique and the get better.
That's so cool.
Which it's hard to get at a work level besides, I hate this. Like, that's the critique you get from a client or someone else. It's not critical. It's, I hate this.
Well, there's 2 sides to that comment, right? Number one is that in a lot of cases we're cranking stuff out at a quick rate, and there's not. I don't think anybody on the receiving end is under the impression that they should be giving a lot of time to reflect upon the creative elements of our work.
Oh,
right?
I understand it.
I know you do.
But from an artist only perspective, that sucks. As
it's frustrating, right?
Adult designer level, because there's a complete separation of art and design. Like, it's a lot of people don't understand is it's not the same mindset.
Okay, so let's talk about that then, because I'm gonna try and tie it back to something that you said earlier, if I can. But go ahead. What's the difference between art and design?
Art is self-expression. It's expression of yourself. Design is expression for other people. My job isn't to communicate what I feel. My job is to communicate what the client feels to a customer. No matter if it's just a little logo, I have to market that to a certain people. And then the difference in a lot of artists and art designers don't have to be artists, but it does help. Artists don't need to be designers because their job is it's mostly self-expression. So there's also a lot more jobs in design, not as much in art. And then, so a lot of artists feel a level above designers, which, at least at a school level, not so much as an adult, but at a school level, it was always like, well, those are for a client, that's not real art.
Well, but, and you and I could look at that and say, well, that's not very realistic, because it's difficult to make a life for yourself or a family as a true artist, right? It's a real stretch to go in that direction. It's a real leap of faith to base your entire life on some form of self-expression.
Plus, if you look at all the most famous paintings that you're going to look at, they're commissioned works. So none of them are self-expression either. So commercial art is what moves and usually lasts. So
right.
Michelangelo's, not Madonna.
David
is paid for by the church. Or portraits were paid for by the patron. Very rarely is art that stands a long time, not for someone else or paid for by someone else.
Interesting. I've never thought of it that way. So what you're saying is that there's maybe a touch of hypocrisy to the pure artist's statement that I, artist of any style, am solely expressing myself through my art for no other reason other than just to do it. And either you appreciate it or you don't. And you're saying, well, that's really not the case, because ultimately even those types of artists realize they got to make a paycheck and somebody's going to pay them to do it.
Yeah, that, or you're trying to put it in a gallery for sale. Eventually, everything is for sale. Doesn't matter what it is, everything is for sale. Everything that's made and sold is also designed.
Right.
Book covers on the table, Starbucks coffee, all designed. At what point in your life did you start to develop an artistic style or curiosity? Probably elementary school.
Yeah.
I've been drawing since I was a kid. I was really into like Sailor Moon and anime growing up. Still am. But drawing is also a way that I made friends.
Really?
Because I moved quite a bit in like elementary school and middle school. So you can start drawing and people come up, what are you drawing? Can you draw me? So it's like a gateway without actually having to talk to people.
Interesting. You know, I know you listened to Sydney's podcast as well too, and she indicated that as soon as she started to learn how to cartoon and draw, she attracted attention, was actually earning some money to buy herself candy and stuff like that because people liked it.
I never made money did it. I would just do it for free.
Right.
But yeah, same kind of
experience. You were a real artist back then.
No, just I just like drawing, and I'm a shy person generally, so it's a lot easier to have that expression than to actually have to go talk to people.
Is that okay, there's a few points I want to make here. Number one, is the shyness, is that sort of inherent with the artist's, persona? I
don't know, because I know plenty of people, at least when I was in school, who were very extroverted. I think it's person by person. I went through a lot of hard things growing up, so it was much easier to just like internalize it and then externalize with art.
I can relate to that as well too. I had some challenges growing up as well too that I look back now that definitely helped lead me to be a little bit more introverted at that time of my life. I too had a fondness for drawing and doodling and so I took art class all through high school and I enjoyed that. And it wasn't really until I really started to take hold more with music that I realized that was something that I liked more. You won't find me doodling anymore really, because that wasn't something that stuck with me, but it was there as a child as well. And I would sit in my room for hours just doodling and drawing little cartoons and stuff, and that's kind of where it got in for me. That's where it got for you. And I think I would have to say in 4 or 5 of these conversations that I've had thus far with our other team, that's a common thread, is the drawing first.
Yeah, it's something I always stuck to just because I could do it. Like I can't make things with my hands. I can do a couple little things with clay, but don't enjoy things. I don't like being dirty. Didn't like being sweaty till I got into like weightlifting and stuff like that, but generally don't like outside. So like art I can do anywhere, and it's very not messy unless you're specifically doing painting or something, and if you're good at it you could probably be pretty neat.
Right.
But yeah, it's trauma turned into internalizing, turned into externalizing in art.
So at that age, when you start realizing that you have a skill or talent and ability in this, at what point do you say, this is something that I want to do for my life?
So in middle school, I applied and got into a magnet school for, funny enough, design, but I didn't think I was going to go into design. I wanted to go into more illustration. I didn't stay in that school because we moved back to Florida, but I took a class in AutoCAD. So I was actually looking into thinking about being an architect.
It was architecture,
Yeah,
right?
I was thinking about being an architect for a couple years. I took only 2 weeks of design before I moved. And then I got into high school and was in musical theater, so I thought about going, or theater in general. So I did actually think about going into like scenic design. And I built sets and I did a lot of that in high school. Then I'm like, I'm not going to have a job. There's very little money in theater.
Right. Excuse me. Hold on.
Gesundheit.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. I think that might be my first sneeze on the podcast. Thank you.
So everything
Dankeschön.
I did was built into something with art. Then I found out with architecture, you're just going to do boring stuff. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that.
Now, why do you say that?
Starting level, you're going to do like office buildings and details inside of that. And I'm not meticulous. I'm not detail oriented. So architecture probably wasn't the right fit for me. I mean, yes, you use a program, but perfect lining up is something I'm not. I eyeball or use the alignment tool a lot in like my programs. I don't have to measure.
It's funny. I took an architectural drawing class. I want to say in 7th or 8th grade. It was offered for a semester, quarter, whatever it was, and at first I really liked it, right? But I found that, and I find this way a lot of things. I can start off with a high level of meticulousness or detail. But after a while, I start to grow impatient, and then I start moving faster, and my attention to that detail starts to waver. So I realize, and I've learned this later in life, that I'm very project-oriented. Like I like to really hyper-focus on a project, and I'll go crazy detail until it's done. But when it's done, I got to move on, right?
Yeah.
In architecture, I thought, wow, this would be something I could really enjoy, but I just couldn't stay with the length of detail that it required to finish like a large architectural drawing, even at the 7th or 8th grade level.
Yeah, I don't have the patience for that.
Right.
I'm a big picture gal.
Right.
These details, we'll figure it out a little later. Big picture. All right, I know where everything is going to be. I start drawing or designing. Oh, well, that doesn't really work. We'll tweak it. But like, I never have all those details set in the beginning, because if I try and set them in the beginning and the paragraph's longer, or the photo just doesn't quite reach the bottom, doesn't quite work.
And then acute OCD Chris comes in, and I'm like, oh.
Well, thankfully, 7 years in, I know how to prepare for that. And the beautiful thing is, in my programs, we have ruler tools, which help tremendously.
Oh, there's there's even on these monitors on the cameras, there's like little ruler tools that are grids.
Oh, God.
You know, so you can like line everything up in a grid. I love that. It makes it so easy, you know. Yeah,
because otherwise, something will look centered, but it'll be slightly off, or because of maybe a background or just how the thing laid out, it might be perfectly centered, but it doesn't work because it's perfectly centered. So you actually have to offset it so that it visually makes sense. So like, let's say you have two logos and you be next to each other, but one's tall and one's horizontal. You really have to. They can't be the same height or width. The orientation isn't right, so you kind of have to tweak them until it
looks right.
Visually looks right.
Right.
And that's kind of a design challenge.
Do you find, now you mentioned earlier that there's a difference between art and design, right? And my observation of you is that you are still able to do both, right? Here, you do design, but I know that you also do a lot of drawing, and that is more expressive art for you, right?
Yeah.
Do you find that you need both to keep that desire balanced out?
So like, I do a lot of like just fun projects for myself, even with design, and I try and use my art skills towards them. But yeah, sometimes I just like drawing. It's something I can do while watching TV. It's relaxing. At that point, it's, you know, people like now it's therapeutic to draw coloring books. That's what drawing is for me.
Oh, is that a thing? Mm-hmm. Really?
Yeah, like therapeutic coloring books and stuff. Or there's apps on your phone where you can color.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, oh, well, it's very popular, even before the pandemic, because it's expression, but it's not like, it's guided expression. It's like almost doing yoga, but with art.
Okay.
For me, I also like seeing improvement, so that's why I kind of keep drawing. So now I do digital versus like traditional. And I can look at something from a year ago and be like, oh, I learned this by doing it. But art, yeah, even sometimes now, if I really need to, I will sketch an idea before I start building it.
Mm-hmm.
At this level of production, you can't really do that.
That was when I first got into the business. That was actually one of my favorite things, because, you know, at that time there was a lot of news. We did tons of newspaper ads, and I so looked forward to sitting down with a blank piece of paper and my ruler, right? And, you know, kind of blocking out my headline and subhead and, you know, features and all that stuff. And I really enjoyed sketching out and laying out an ad in advance and being able to hand that in.
That's how I was taught as well. Even when I started here, I still we did a ton of newspapers when I started, and that's only 7 years ago.
I know.
But a lot of our client services or account execs at the time, you know, would sometimes draw things. The issue with like someone other than you drawing something is they don't think about proportions, but it is still helpful to, you know, even just thumbnail a doodle.
Right.
Most artists do thumbnail and do primarily sketching before they even start a project. You don't just go from straight to canvas most of the time.
Right.
You do, you know, oh, this is how I'm going to kind of lay it out, and you think about it. I mean, that's why we have storyboards for even video, is to get an idea of what it will look like.
Do you find, you know, the retail automotive space for creativity and design is one that, and I suppose many businesses are like this, but it has its own sort of set of guidelines and rules and restrictions and sort of boxes that you can work in, right? Mm-hmm. Do you find that frustrating at times, the sort of the limitations that our business places on creativity?
I hate it and love it at the same time, because I like to know what my box is and what I need to fit everything in.
Right.
That's something I've always liked, is don't just willy-nilly. You can't just say, hey, make me something. I need to know what kind of things you're looking for, what needs to go in it. Basics of design is I need all the elements to go into it. Mm-hmm. So with retail automotive, it's just more elements. And then there's the fun balance of trying to fit factory branding, client branding, or just making it interesting. So you have a lot of boxes that have to make, like you have like almost like a Venn diagram. There's a lot of circles you have to fill, and you just got to get that one point. But then you have to be really creative in that tiny point, and that can be very frustrating. I like it a lot of the time, not all the time.
Right.
But yeah, it's very frustrating trying to fit creativity in a tiny dot,
right,
inside of this big amount of circles I'm trying to fill. And then trying to remember all those details, because there's nuances to every single brand. There's nuances to every client. There's nuances to even every client or client manager. They might like something over a different client manager. Or even if I built something for like you and Brad, it's what you like is different.
Right.
So it's trying to appease your taste as well as appease what the project entails.
It's challenging at times, you know, particularly, and I know that it's frustrating particularly
Yeah, so that's a hard one too.
For you and your crew or the video guys, you know, because you've been given some directions and initial sense of guidance on what you need to do, and then you do it, right? And then, as we were talking about before, you send it out and it's like, I hate that stinks, do this, and you have to develop some thick skin, because A, you're cranking out so much work, and B, it's often getting, you know, changed and cut up and slashed around so quickly that what you put your heart and soul into sometimes literally gets destroyed within minutes, right?
So I was taught, don't get attached. Like, put your best foot forward as much as possible, but try, and I find that very hard as an art person to not get attached. But because if you get attached to a design, most 90% of the time that's going to change. I've never seen a design get approved 100% from I made it out. Even when I've even done a logo for like my cousin or something, there's always going to be changes, because maybe he didn't tell me, well, I'm required to use this font, or, that's not the right size, I gave you the wrong size, or, I don't really like that color. Or, my favorite is, can you make the logo bigger?
Of course.
Always, can I make the logo bigger?
I want my name up in bright lights for everyone to see, right?
Yeah. So you have to have thick skin, and hopefully you have that before going into the real world.
Right.
but sometimes you kind of have to learn. And I'm a very sensitive person. You know that.
Yes.
So it took me a long time to get through. I mean, there's even times now that I'll get feedback, and it's just probably better that I didn't see the client's message, because I'll get very offended. And it's not that they mean anything towards me, of course.
Right.
But it's just like, okay, I get you didn't like it.
They called your baby ugly.
It's not the words they use, but yeah, they called my baby ugly.
Right.
So please don't call my baby ugly. Just tell me what you need changed on my baby. Baby
right.
needs a bow. Baby needs a mask, but baby's not that bad.
Do you find enjoyment in this particular craft?
Most days.
Right.
There are days, especially since, last year in March, that you get a lot of creative burnout.
Right.
And it's sometimes you're creative. You can just that's not how it works. I don't always understand, or if my head's not in the right place, if it's, it's been a long week and it's like 4:30 on a Friday, there's no creative juices. They're gone.
Right.
You ever heard the spoon theory?
No,
where you can you have a certain amount of spoons at the beginning of the day, and you have to doll out for so much. Usually they use it for mental health, but I'll use it for creativity as well.
Okay.
Well, I have 100 spoons. I used 50 spoons to get through this one piece. I only can spare one spoon for the rest of these ads I'm working on.
Right.
So, I mean, that happens a lot. Hopefully not as much. Or I know old tricks. Okay. I know what this will work. I can really just tweak it, and it doesn't have to be 100%. You actually find people that are like, I want a whole new look. That's BS. That they want something new, but it doesn't have, you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right. Just something that looks different to them at the period of time that they're looking at it.
Well, and that's a lot of design.
Right. It's funny you use the spoon analogy. It made me think of something that Brad taught me when we were out riding bikes at times, and he's, done a lot more riding over the years than me. And, there's this thing, like, in most cases, like, if you're going up a hill, like, don't stand up and, like, just crank it out. Like, stay in your saddle and just pedal up. Because when you get out of your saddle, that's called burning a match. Like, okay. And so he says, you don't want to burn all your matches because you run out of energy. So it's the same thing as the spoon theory, where, you can't utilize all of your resources. You have to be very careful about how you, as you said, dole them out through the day.
Yeah, you only have so many spoons.
Let's talk about your love of anime.
Oh, Donna's daughter just got into it too.
Did she really?
I had to teach Donna.
Where did tell me about this? Where did this come from? When we discovered it, and why do you love it so much?
So Cartoon Network,
right,
used to play them at like 3 or 4 o'clock after school, and they used to play, like, my favorite show growing up was this one called Sailor Moon, which is the pinnacle of 90s girl power, like, pretty girls wearing set colors, because every girl loves a set colors, like Power Rangers. You know how there's all different colors?
Right.
So these are like Power Rangers, like, I guess Power Rangers can be good for girls. Power Rangers for 6-year-old Erin.
Right, okay.
So I get magic, there's cats, there's pretty dresses, and it's not like American shows at the time, which are really, if you really look at American cartoons at the early 90s, they're all like Ren and Stimpy and like gross and like these, and they're really cool as an adult, and I like watching them now.
Right.
As a kid, that's not what I was into. I wanted pretty things.
Right.
I was the pinnacle of like Disney princesses as a kid, because I also loved Disney princesses growing up. So, and it was new. This wasn't something you saw a lot. There's only like 2 or 3 shows on at the time. Now it's like I can watch anime really easy.
But is anime, like, when I hear the word anime, I immediately think of Japan.
Yeah.
Right. So is all anime essentially from Japan? Is it that sort of, there's that look?
That's the hot debate amongst the anime fans. Technically, you could say yes, but there are American shows that are styled the same way, and the storyline is a similar way. Technically, anime started as a reaction to Disney. So like World War I or II, and a lot of Disney was coming to Japan, they were making animated shorts that were propaganda against America, using Mickey as like the enemy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's really, I could find you the clips, because I watched a lot of conventions. I watch a lot of, or go to panels for these things. they're really interesting. Like, you just see Mickey, like, especially like Steamboat Mickey style, like shooting them down on like the island.
Really?
And they'll use like Japanese like mythical heroes as like fighting against Mickey or against man, like, and then so all these anime directors, grew up watching Disney with Snow White and Cinderella, and they got inspired and they started making their own animation. So you got things like Astro Boy and all of the transformy things, because they really liked robots. They still really like robots. Like, that's how you have Transformers, Voltron, all the shows. Those are anime.
Right. Now, the first show that I can remember being, seeing as a child, which I think was a version of anime, was a show called Speed Racer. Is that anime?
Yep.
Yeah, it was like just like a little boy driving in some car. I don't even know if there was any dialogue, really. Was there?
I don't know.
Because a lot of anime in my mind, it's sort of like there's not even really dialogue. It's like thought clouds and stuff like that.
They do both. And anime in the 80s, 70s, 60s didn't have as much of a set style like it now does, with the big eyes and the flat drawings and the curved hair, which came out of things like Sailor Moon and Revolutionary Girl Utena and Dragon Ball. You've probably seen Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z at some point.
I don't even know. But
like, anime was the Japanese style, and a lot of it they add their own mythos of like the samurai like fighters, and like their mythology is added a lot into it. Even shows based on like Christian models, because there are like things with nuns and stuff. But then they'll add their own flair with their own history, adding in characters maybe that the younger generation doesn't know, but they grew up hearing about.
Is there a connection between? I'm gonna draw together three seemingly disparate things that I think have some relative connection. All right, so you've got anime, right? And then I immediately think of Hello Kitty, and then I think of like this whole Japanese like Harajuku style, that has an extreme cartoony nature to it, right? I don't know if these things are linked together or if they're just three separate things, but in my mind, they all sort of flow from a similar creativity.
We're all Japanese, so they're all connected.
Yes, okay, I got that right.
So, anime picks up elements of, obviously, Hello Kitty. I think Hello Kitty can be counted as anime. Sometimes depends on the show, but it's more of a kid-oriented stuff. But adults love Hello Kitty. I love Hello Kitty. And then Harajuku, the style, because there's that whole fashion. They have Lolita and all their other fashion stuff, is more of, I think, a rebellion against traditionalism in Japan.
Okay.
Because the youth culture, is trying to break some of the things. Like, women don't have all the same rights, and the pay gap is really bad in Japan. When you work in an office, you have to be very business oriented. I couldn't dress like this at a Japanese business.
No, I couldn't dress like this.
You wear suits, grays, blues, browns.
Yep.
So I think it's more of a rebellion, so more similar to like the punk from like the 80s.
Okay.
Now, take everything I say with a grain of salt, because I don't know as much about the fashion side. Because even in Japan, anime isn't anime is popular. A lot of people watch it, but it's still super nerdy. You don't talk about liking anime if you're a person in Japan. Like, that's otakus. Those are the nerds. Those are you don't talk about it. It's very popular, but you don't talk about it.
Okay.
Again, I could be wrong, but that's from my experience.
It's an outsider thing.
It's an outsider thing. Now, in the popular or in US, it's different. Now, not everybody likes anime, but it's like superheroes now. Everybody probably watches some anime or watches some superhero movies or watches Game of Thrones. It's not on the edge like it was in the 80s, 90s, or led you to believe. Jocks watch the same things I watch.
Right. It's so funny that the word jocks still gets used. It's a term that everybody understands.
Jocks is not that all jocks are
jocks.
The jocks are stupid. No, that's not true. But there's still athletic. Even when I was in high school, there still was a separation of the popular kids who are more athletic into sports versus I was in theater, so theater geeks, band geeks. We weren't called geeks, and there wasn't you guys can't sit with us. There wasn't any of that. But there's still a slight divide.
There was still some people had classified you some way somehow. Right. Interesting. So you develop this interest as a child in animation, design, I know you're a big Harry Potter fan, right? So I think you really like to read and get into these sort of magical, mystical worlds and stuff. Escapism. And how do you, at this stage of your life and career, pull all that together? And how do you hope to, or what do you wish to be able to do with this collection of interests that you have and this collection of talent combined with your drive and work ethic? Like, where do you want to take that?
Like 10 years from now, or
this year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Like, what would be your, your castle on the hill vision, if that's even a reasonable analogy?
My castle on the hill, probably less automotive. Not that I don't love my job. I obviously love my job. I've been here for 7 years, but like, I love to design more, not for animations, but really building like not mascot isn't the word, because mascot sounds like your sports mascot, but like illustrations of people for their branding, building more. I like branding, which builds a lot from my art background. So because there's a lot of drawing that I do with logos and that kind of stuff. So I really like building some things from I don't know where I want to be. I know what I want to, the things I want to build.
Okay, get one example. Something that you want to, like, something that you'd like to build. Are we just talking about characters or design elements that help brand?
I like building characters as part of the brand.
Okay.
Building illustrations that go with the brand.
Okay.
So I'd love to do more of that. I don't do a lot of it, but I really like, and you've seen, I did illustrations of my whole team a few years ago.
Yeah, I still saved those little cards somewhere. They're great.
Which now, obviously, it's been a couple of years. My style's improved. My skills translating from drawing to art has improved. So actually, one day I need to remake those. Even with my friends, I built all of their original characters as illustrations in December because I just needed a project.
Right.
So I like doing that even with myself for my own branding. I built, myself as an illustrator, and I've kind of given different looks for different seasons.
It would be so cool. See, okay, so again, I'm always searching for this moment in these conversations, and the moment is, what is the thing that you love and wish to do, and how can we utilize that desire, right, to create something for our clients? I mean, because at the end of the day, that's what we do, right? I mean, we're hired to come up with ideas to help people market and sell their business. And so now, and every one of these conversations, I've been able to take away something from each person that it's like, I didn't know that they really had this strong desire to do this. Now, shame on me because I haven't been writing it down. So I'm having to, I think after this one, I'm going to have to write this stuff down.
Help.
To know. But that's what I'm hoping to get out of these conversations, more than in addition to getting to know each other better, right? How can we empower you, Erin, to do, and really to have a blank canvas to create whatever it is that your heart desires within the context of what we do here? Because that's what everybody here wants to do in their own way.
Here, I'd love to help us build out more of a creative side of Herman branding, because I don't think that we do enough posting or enough.
Oh, we've totally. I mean, this whole thing is now we're just like getting the machine going again.
Interesting, like holiday oriented. I like building like characters and stuff like that. Obviously, I like building characters. I did it for my entire team.
But how fun would it if you revisited all your characters of like all of us, and then we had literal, designed animated
like even
characters.
If they were based on like animals or something would be interesting, like what your personality, like Tammy would be like a songbird or something.
But that'd be so cool.
It would be really cool. It's just it would be something I'd like to do because I like building characters based on people.
Right.
I love, most of even my comic I worked on in college with my friend was based on us. We didn't make up characters, we just built ourselves.
Right. So if you were to just, I'm almost afraid to ask, if you were to say, all right, Chris, I'm designing your character and basing it on an animal, what animal would you choose?
You're hard because you're kind of like a chameleon. Since I've known you, you have gone through many stages of like change.
Right.
So what you were 7 years ago, you wouldn't be today. So right now I'm saying chameleon.
Interesting.
Because you kind of adapt who you are as you've
That's true. Yeah, my persona does shift depending on what particular phases I'm going through in life. There's no doubt about that.
So right now you're a chameleon.
Chameleon. Okay. All right. I'll take that.
There are worse animals. Right now I'm either an octopus or a cat.
But you love octopus.
I love octopuses.
Why? What is it about an octopus?
I don't know. I think it started because I watched this one anime in college.
Right.
But then, like, if you watch them, they're really intelligent creatures. And then there's so many nuances to, like, each of the species. And they're so, like, cool. Like, all the different spots. I also like jellyfishes, too.
Right.
Because, even though they don't have any brains, but they're so pretty. If you're going for a pure aesthetic.
Oh, they're beautiful.
They're beautiful. Oh, sorry. Like marine biology, even just fish. I don't like fish, but I like how they look. Right. Aesthetically, marine life is much more interesting than above ground. But I also like spiders for aesthetic, but don't want to look at them. Right. But, look at a fish. Look at all the different colors. They're always neon colors. Or even underground ones, or even like sub like deep water ones. Right. When you pull them out, they're crazy colors. Yeah, they're beautiful. Or even if they're not, they have these giant eyeballs just like hanging down. I mean, how cool is that? You don't get that in like the middle of the rainforest. You got like a sloth with 2 hooks hanging somewhere. That fish is much more interesting. I gotta laugh.
No, it's hysterical. Now we have reached the point in the conversation where we veered into something very uniquely you, which is really beautiful to experience with you, right? Because, you are absolutely 1,000% passionate about how you're explaining this stuff. It moves you that much.
I have a lot of passion about explaining why octopuses are better than other animals.
All right, okay, let's. But
I won't continue on that.
Let's hang on a second. Let me check my confidence monitor. All right, let's see. All right, now we're good. Let me ask you one thing, and then we'll wrap up on this note that we're going to say I'm a chameleon and you're an octopus. Okay, so why? One more reason why the octopus is such a fascinating and supreme species.
So, I also like the weird ultra feminism of them. Besides the women in most underwater species, take everything I say with a grain of salt, are larger. Mm-hmm. And the male just throws his genitals at the female octopus and runs away. And I just think that's funny. But like, there's also, I like the aesthetic of the tentacles. I grew up watching a lot of Disney princesses. So Ursula was one of my favorite villains, and she's a big old octopus. Uh-huh. And I think it was really just that anime. I still don't know why octopus is so much more than other ones. I just kind of became obsessed with them.
You have an octopus tattoo, don't you?
Yeah, I have. Well, it's not just an octopus. It's kind of like if Ursula was younger, because she kind of looks like Ariel. Right. And Ursula's actually in the musical her aunt. So it's based off this Chris Sanders, who is the designer for Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon. Uh-huh. He used to do a bunch of mermaid illustrations. So it's based on one of his mermaid illustrations, but instead of a tail, she has tentacle legs. So that's on my thigh here, and then I have a jellyfish on the shoulder with like a little girl, like they're floating up into the sky like a fantasy illustration. Because most of my tattoos are kind of fantasy.
Why?
I like the art. It's not so much like, I like fantasy. I read Harry Potter, I watch Game of Thrones. I like anime, and they're all like magical girls, princesses from outer space. Right. So fantasy is kind of built into who I am.
Okay, but I'm again, why? Is there like a need for sort of this like escapism in your mind or something like that?
Part escapism, part of empowering. Because since I'm, especially a very sensitive person, it's very empowering to be like, oh, I can be powerful too, even if it's through magical means. I mean, that's part of Harry Potter. You have this little kid who is powerless in a loveless home. Mm-hmm. And then he's getting told he's the chosen one. And he has all this power, all this money, all of this thing. And just everybody has that ability at some point to become powerful. You are not unpowerful. You're not limited by where you are.
Or what you've been through.
I can
see in your eyes right now how much that means to you.
Yeah. obviously I have it better than other people in a lot of different circumstances, but I know what it feels like to be powerless, and it's very uncomfortable. So being able to leave that and get out of that, whether it's through magical means or through I have the strength to get through it means, it's nice to know that you are not limited, and you, even if you feel powerless, you're not. Does that make sense?
100%. I want to wrap up there by saying, because it's you just touched my heart in how you just said that, and I understand what you're saying, and I see it in you, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for you and the power that you have, and that you continue to work to develop. It's inspiring.
Thank you.
And you just sharing that in just this moment was very touching. So I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Great job.
Coffee toast.